Alright, today I'll give everyone a brief introduction to this Excel dashboard. Regarding the sequence of its data, we know that it can achieve dynamic changes. Whether it's this KPI, these indicators, or this number axis, you can see that these charts and graphs, as well as the detailed table below, will all change accordingly. So, how is this achieved? Let's take a look step by step. Today, we'll just get an overview. First, let's talk about slicers. We know that slicers are used to filter the data table. This is very simple. Just insert, and then you can select a slicer, for example, by product. That means it's a product slicer, and it can interact with other elements. Okay, we can also beautify the slicer a bit. There are different theme templates available. You can also use custom styles to make it look even better. I won't go into too much detail here. Now let's go back to the previous section. Here, we've placed the slicer at the front. For example, when I select something, you can see that the background actually changes accordingly. It updates along with your selection. It's an interactive relationship. Next, what we actually want to achieve is that after I make a selection, this table changes, and then these tables here should also update accordingly. At the same time, the charts and KPIs that reference this data should also update based on the data within. Accordingly, they will also change. I'm not sure if everyone understands. First, I insert a slicer into this data table. This is selecting the slicer, and after the slicer is selected, the corresponding data will change. After the data changes, if, for example, the logic for my modeling calculations here comes from this data point, then wouldn't it also change accordingly? You see, it will also change accordingly, and the data relationships that my charts reference are drawn from this table. So this chart will also change accordingly, which means the whole thing forms a linked relationship. Okay, let's take a look at how to actually do this. For example, let's first look at sales volume. For sales volume, I inserted a text box. The text box can actually have a function inserted into it. For example, after I select the text box here, I can directly enter in this function input box which cell from which table it references. For instance, here it is referencing cell A4, this diagonal cell right here, so it will follow along. If the value in cell A4 changes, it will update accordingly. Now, how did cell A4 come about? Let's take a look. Cell A4 actually comes from my data, calculated from the data in the data sheet. Look, these are the logical relationships between these KPIs. Now let's look at these bar charts. First, this bar chart is interactive, and second, there's an issue where the vertical axis needs to change accordingly. That is, when I select it, or this axis, if, for example, I select Germany, actually, it only has data from April to November, so the axis will also adjust accordingly. This actually requires a small trick as well. How do we achieve this? First, with this period, we know that by using the salt plus unique function and then adding the filter function, we get a combination. Select this data table. Then what we need to do is, because sometimes if I select, say, only a certain range, for example from B2 to B9 or from B2 to B13, in the case where everything is selected, all the data is present. But if I select a specific country, since some countries might not have data up to B13, only up to October, if you define the axis, the selected range is still from B2 to B13. Then there might be some empty or redundant entries, and it won't update dynamically here. So how do we solve this problem? Here, we use another technique, which is to define a named range. For example, here I have defined a function. Actually, I have defined a named range. For instance, this is the B2 range. What do we use here? We use this spill operator, this symbol. We know that this symbol will adjust dynamically as needed. It will automatically spill dynamically as the data changes. So once the range is named, it will be fixed. For example, if I change it, it will update accordingly. Now, when we look at this chart here, when I go ahead and select the specific data range, you will clearly notice right here that for the horizontal axis, I have actually utilized this specific named range called pair, which is definitely not a function, but simply this named range. Let's take another quick look at it right here. We can see that this range is called period. So when I select it here, I just select it directly. This is the file name book11copy.excel.period. It will automatically reference this range. See? In this way, it will automatically expand or contract as the range changes. Look, see, there are only 4 periods here, so it automatically becomes 4. this is a little trick, and the same applies to other data as well. The same setup means that I first need to name this, and then when creating the chart, I select this named array when choosing the reference range. For example, this is naming. Here, I'm directly using the name instead of a specific range. Okay, so here I just wanted to quickly introduce this to everyone. Thank you.